Colleen Brisebois came back to Spruce Narrows in the last week of October with 2 suitcases. A 7-year-old who had stopped asking questions and a bank balance that would not see her past Christmas. No one met her at the bus. The town did not do welcomes anymore, not since the mill went quiet. It did the other thing instead, the slow look from behind a kitchen curtain, the nod across the parking lot that cost a person nothing and meant about as much. Her mother's house on Caribou Street had stood empty 14 months, and it smelled like it the moment the door gave. She told herself what she had told herself at the start of every shift for 20 years, the only prayer she still half believed in: keep moving, don't sit down, you can come apart later when there's time for it. There was never time for it. And then, on a flat gray evening in the middle of November, the old man who lived on the other side of the fence said one plain thing to her. And, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Colleen Brisebois stopped. The coach had let them off at the Esso on the highway because the bus depot had closed years back and nobody had bothered to update the schedule. Etta held her mother's coat sleeve with both mittened hands the whole walk into town, not the way a child holds on out of fear of getting lost, but the way a person holds the railing on a boat. She did not complain about the cold, though it was the kind of cold that found the gaps in everything you wore. She did not ask how much farther. She had been a different child a year ago. A child who narrated the world out loud and asked 40 questions before breakfast. And Colleen knew exactly when the questions had stopped and would have given anything not to know. The town looked smaller than it lived in her memory, the way places do. Half the storefronts on the main drag wore brown paper in their windows. The diner where her father used to take her for Sunday hot chicken sandwiches was a vape shop now. The Royal Canadian Legion still had its sign up and its lights on, which felt, absurdly, like the only thing in Spruce Narrows still breathing. A woman came out of the pharmacy, recognized Colleen, and developed a sudden deep interest in her own phone. Colleen could not tell if it was unkindness, or just that nobody in a town like this knew what to say to a person who left to make something of herself, and came home with nothing showing for it but a kid and a dead mother's house. The house was the last one on Caribou before the road turned to gravel and ran down to the lake. It was a story and a half, with cedar shakes gone the color of old nickels and a veranda that listed to the right like it was leaning into a wind that had stopped blowing years ago. Her mother had kept geraniums in the window boxes and a Canadian flag clipped to the post every May 24. The flag was gone. The window boxes held the black stalks of something that had died and been left to stand there. The front step took her weight with a groan, and the storm door had swelled in its frame so that she had to set her shoulder to it. When it let go, the smell came out at her. Cold ash, damp plaster, and underneath that something faintly sweet and turned, the smell of a house that had been shut up around the last of itself. Etta stood in the doorway with her suitcase, looking at the brown water stain that spread across the ceiling like a bruise on fruit. "Is this where we live now?" she said. It was not really a question. She had learned, somewhere in the last year, to make her sentences land flat so that no one could disappoint her with the answer. "Yeah, monkey," Colleen said. "This is it." She did not say home. She was not sure she had the right to the word, or that the word would have her. That first night, she put Etta to bed on the Chesterfield in the front room because the mattress in the spare bedroom upstairs had gone yellow at the edges and smelled of mice, and she laid 2 coats over the girl and sat on the floor beside her with her back against the cold radiator, listening to her breathe. Outside, somewhere down the slope, the lake made the small sounds a lake makes before it gives up and freezes, a slow lap and shift in the dark. Colleen did not sleep. She had not really slept in 3 years, not the kind that put anything back. She had learned to function on the thin gray edge of it, to make herself sharp on coffee and habit, to be the calmest set of hands in a trauma bay at 4 in the morning while every wire inside her stood stripped to the copper. People had praised her for it. That was the part she could not explain to anyone. That they had given her a plaque for the thing that was killing her. The next morning she found the kitchen tap dripped, the back door would not lock, and the water heater in the cellar was a cold, dead drum of rust. She made a list of it in her head and then put the list away, because none of it mattered when she opened her banking app and looked at the number there. $1,100 and change. The settlement from the divorce had gone to the deposit and the bus tickets and the lawyer who had not, in the end, been able to get Dale to commit to anything that looked like steadiness. Dale was in Mississauga now, with a woman who did Pilates and a condo that smelled of nothing at all. He sent money when he remembered, which was to say when his guilt got loud enough, and he called Etta on the third Sunday of the month and asked her about school in the bright false voice of a man reading from a card. Colleen did not hate him for leaving. She had stopped having the energy to hate anyone. She only wished, sometimes in the worst part of the night, that he had taken some of the weight with him when he went, instead of leaving her holding all of it and the bag besides. She was standing on the veranda the third morning, looking at nothing, a mug of instant going cold in her hand, when the man next door came out to put salt on his walk. He was old, 70 at least, broad and stooped in a green plaid coat, and a toque pushed back off his forehead. He moved the way men move when their knees have done 40 years of standing on concrete. He had a sack of ice melt over one shoulder and an old yellow lab at his heel that walked with the same careful list he did. He scattered a handful across his own steps, looked up, saw her, and lifted his chin in the smallest possible greeting. "You'll be Marg's girl," he said. Not a question. The nurse, Colleen. She did not move toward the fence. Roland Pelletier. He set the sack down. "Knew your mother 40 years. She used to bring my Pauline soup when Pauline took sick. Real soup, bones in it." He looked at the dead window boxes, then at the listing veranda, then back at Colleen, and whatever he saw in her face he did not flinch from. That was the thing she would remember about him afterward, that first morning, that he looked and did not look away. The way most people did the second they registered how tired you were, as if exhaustion were a thing they might catch. "House needs work," he said. "I know. I got tools." "Got nothing but time and tools." He picked the sack back up. "You let me know." And he went in, the old dog easing up the steps behind him one careful leg at a time, and he did not push it, did not ask her one question about herself, and that, more than anything anyone had said to her in a year, undid something small and held tight behind her ribs. Her brother came on the Saturday. Garrett drove up from Ottawa in a leased SUV that looked obscene parked at the curb of Caribou Street, like a yacht moored at a fish camp. He came through the house the way a claims adjuster goes through a flood, slow, with his hands in his pockets and a tightness around his eyes that meant he was adding numbers. He pressed his thumb into the soft spot of plaster by the back door and frowned when it gave. "Call. This is structural," he said. "This isn't a paint and spruce. The roof's at end of life, the sill's gone on the east side, the wiring's knob and tube. You're looking at 40 grand to make it safe, and that's if nothing else shows up once you open a wall, which it will." He sat down at the kitchen table, in the one chair that did not rock, and folded his hands like a man about to deliver a diagnosis. He was not unkind. That was the worst of it. There's a holding company been buying up the lakefront lots. Fella named Price. They'd give you a fair number for the land alone, more than fair. You take it, you move somewhere Etta can get into a decent school, you get back into a real hospital, and you stop bleeding out in a town that's already dead and doesn't know it. "She starts at the school on Monday," Colleen said. "With what?" "Call." He said it gently, which was how he had always been able to cut deepest. "You've got no job here. You've got no savings. You've got a kid who needs a floor under her, not a project. And you've got He stopped, and his jaw worked, and he chose the next words like a man stepping across thin ice. You've got a habit of carrying things until they break you, and then carrying the broken pieces, too. I watched you do it your whole life. I'm not going to stand here and watch you do it to her. Etta was in the front room, pushing a toy ambulance she had picked from a charity box across the floorboards in slow, patient circles, around and around, the way she did everything now. Colleen looked at her daughter and then at her brother and said nothing, because everything she might have said was true, and being true did not make it bearable. After Garrett left, he hugged her at the door, awkward and hard, and pressed $200 bills into her coat pocket that she found that night and cried over for reasons she could not name. She stood at the sink with both hands flat on the cold steel and looked at the lake going pewter under the early dark, and she felt the floor of herself tilt the way it had been tilting for 3 years. The slow list of a boat taking water it would not admit to. The days closed over them like water. She enrolled Etta at the elementary school on Government Road and walked her there each morning past the boarded-up curling rink and picked her up each afternoon and made the small repairs she could afford from the hardware aisle of the home hardware, the only store on the main drag still keeping regular hours. Silicone for the window frames, a chain and padlock for the back door. Weather stripping she fitted with a hair dryer and her own breath held against the cold leaking in. She kept a schedule because schedule was the only architecture she had ever trusted. Up at 6, lunches made, walk, work the house. Walk, supper, bath, bed. She built the days like a person building a wall they intend to hide behind, and she did not let herself feel the thing standing on the other side of it, the thing she had carried out of a trauma bay in the city 8 months ago and had not set down since. It had a face, the thing. It belonged to a 17-year-old who had come off a dirt bike on a county road north of the city and arrived under her hands at 3:40 on a Tuesday morning. She had done everything right. She had done everything right, and he had died anyway, the way they sometimes simply do, with no error to point to and nowhere to put the grief, and his mother had come through the doors a half-hour later and looked at Colleen's scrubs and screamed at her, a long animal sound that had no words in it, and Colleen had stood and taken it because there was no one else to take it, and because some part of her had felt, standing there, that she deserved it. She had not cried. She had gone back out and triaged a man with chest pain and a toddler with a fever and finished her shift and driven home and lain down beside Dale, who was already mostly gone by then, and stared at the ceiling. She had given her notice 11 days later. She had not cried then either. She had not cried at her mother's funeral 3 weeks after that, or when the lawyer slid the divorce papers across the table, or on the bus coming north with everything she owned in the hold. She had packed it all down and sealed it shut, because that was the skill. That was the whole brutal art of the work she had been good at. To feel it later, to feel it never, to keep the hands steady while the inside of you screamed. But a sealed thing does not stay sealed. It only waits. It came for her on a Thursday in early December, when the lake had finally given up and gone hard and white, and the first real snow was falling past the kitchen window in fat, unheard flakes. She was washing a glass at the sink, Etta's juice glass, and she looked out at the snow and the lake, and she was, all at once, somewhere else, back in the bay, the lights too bright, the monitor's flat insistence, the smell of blood and antiseptic, and the particular fear that has no smell but that she would have known anywhere, and her hands stopped working. Her breath went short and high in her chest. The glass slipped and broke in the sink, and the small bright sound of it was very far away. She got herself down to the floor before her legs could decide it for her back against the cabinet, her knees up, and she sat there in her own kitchen, shaking and gulping at air that would not go all the way in. And she could not have said how long it lasted. Only that it was a long time, and that she had stopped being a woman of 44 in a house on Caribou Street, and become something cornered and small and certain it was about to die. When it eased, when the kitchen came back and the snow was still falling like nothing had happened, she became aware that Etta was standing in the doorway. The girl had not made a sound. She stood in her flannel pajamas with the moose on them, one sock on and one sock off, and she was watching her mother on the floor with an expression Colleen had never seen on a child's face and prayed she would never see again. Not fear of the broken glass, not fear of the dark, but a older, worse fear. The fear of a person who has just understood that the one solid thing in her whole world is not solid at all. Colleen saw it land in her daughter's eyes, and she would carry that image for the rest of her life. She would carry it into sleep and find it waiting in the morning, and it would say the thing she had been refusing to hear for 3 years, in a voice as plain as Roland Pelletier's. You are teaching her how to drown. Go back to bed, monkey, Colleen said. Her voice came out steady. Her hands were not steady. She had learned long ago how to make the voice lie for the rest of her. Etta did not move. Mummy, she said very quietly, in the smallest voice, the one she had been speaking in for a year. Are you still in there? And there it was. 7 words from a 7-year-old standing in a doorway, and they went through every wall Colleen had ever built, straight to the soft, live center of her, because they were the truest thing anyone had said to her in 3 years. She had not been in there. She had been gone for a long time, going through the motions of a mother the way she had gone through the motions of a nurse, present and absent at once. A woman wearing herself like a coat. Her daughter had felt the empty sleeve of her and had been too frightened to say so, and had simply gone quiet instead, had folded all her bright, noisy questions away into a small, flat voice and waited to see if her mother would come back. Colleen began to cry. It came up out of her in a way she had no practice for and no defense against. Ugly and silent and then not silent, and she put her hand over her mouth and could not stop it. And Etta crossed the kitchen in her one sock and climbed into her mother's lap on the cold floor and put her arms around her neck. And the two of them sat there among the broken glass, while the snow came down, and for once Colleen did not say it's all right, or I'm fine, or any of the careful lies. She just held her daughter the way you hold the one thing you are terrified of having already lost. Both arms, full weight, her face in the girl's hair, breathing her in, the cheap shampoo and the warm animal smell of a child. And she thought, if I keep teaching her this, she will learn it perfectly. She is already learning it. She will spend her whole life being the strong one, the calm one, the one who feels it later and never, and she will end up exactly here, on a kitchen floor, with a child of her own in the doorway asking if she is still in there. And the chain will not break unless I break it. I'm here, she said when she could. The word cracked in the middle and she let it crack. I'm right here, Etta. I'm not going anywhere. The girl pressed her face into her mother's collarbone and did not answer. She did not need to. She just held on, and for the first time in a year, Colleen felt her hold on the way a person holds something they have decided to trust again. The next morning, she crossed the strip of snow between the two houses and knocked on Roland Pelletier's door. He opened it in a cardigan with coffee in his hand, the old lab nosing out around his knee, and he looked at her face, the swollen eyes, the night written all over her, and he did not ask what was wrong. He stepped back and held the door. Coffee's on, he said. Boots off. The floor's just done. His kitchen was warm and close and smelled of toast and wood smoke, and there were photographs on the wall by the table, a great many of them. And most of them had the same woman in them at every age, dark-haired and laughing, a woman who was not in the house anymore. Colleen sat down. Roland set a mug in front of her, black, because he had not asked and had guessed right, and he lowered himself into the chair across from her with the slow care of his bad knees. And for a while neither of them said anything, and the not saying was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in a long while. My Pauline went 2 years ago in February, he said at last, looking at the photographs and not at her. Cancer. Took her 10 months, start to finish. He turned his mug a slow quarter turn on the table. I want to tell you something, and you can take it or leave it. Those 10 months, I was the strongest man in this town. Everybody said so. Roland, you're a rock, Roland. I don't know how you do it. Drove her to every appointment 2 hours each way. Learned to do the pills, the dressings, all of it. Never let her see me crack. Not once. He stopped. His jaw moved. And you know what she said to me, near the end, when she could still talk? She said, Roland, I'm dying and you won't be sad in front of me, and it makes me so lonesome I could scream. She said, I don't need you to be strong. I need you to be here with me while I go. And I'd been so busy being a rock I'd left her to do the worst thing a person ever does all by herself, with a stranger sitting right beside her in my clothes. He looked at Colleen then, finally, straight on. I was so scared of falling apart that I missed it. I missed her. The strong fella in the photographs, that's not who she needed. She needed the one who'd hold her hand and bawl, and I couldn't be him in time. Colleen sat with the mug between her hands and could not speak. I watched you come back to that house, Roland said. I watched you fix the lock on a door so nobody can get in, and I thought, there's a girl who's locked every door she's got and called it keeping safe. And I'll tell you what took me 68 years and the loss of the best woman I ever knew to learn, and you can have it for free. He leaned forward, and his voice did not rise. It dropped the way the truest things do. The ones who wave you off the hardest, get away, I'm fine, I've got it. Those are the ones going under quietest. You spent your whole life pulling people out of the water, Colleen. It never once occurred to you that you were allowed to be the one who needs the rope. Well, here's your rope. I'm an old man with a truck full of tools and nothing left to lose and a fence between us. And I'm telling you, you don't have to do this alone, and neither do I. She did not remember afterward deciding to cry again, only that she did, sitting at a stranger's kitchen table with the snow piling on the sill, and that Roland Pelletier did not say there, did not pat her, did not look away, just sat across from her and let her, the way you let weather happen, the way you stay with someone while they go through the worst of it, because staying is the only thing that was ever any use. That afternoon she called Garrett. He answered mid-sentence, something about a meeting, and she waited until he ran down. I'm not selling the house, she said. Call, I heard you. I heard everything you said, and some of it was right. And I'm going to need help, and I don't have a plan that fits on a spreadsheet. But Etta is going to grow up in this house, on this street, by this lake, and I'm going to be the one in there with her when she does. All the way in there. Not the version of me that just keeps the lights on. There was a long quiet on the line. She could hear her brother breathing. You can be mad at me, she said. But I need you to be mad at me from over there, because I haven't got room to carry yours too. When Garrett spoke again, his voice had changed, gone rough and low. Mum would have said the same thing, he said. Word for word. It was not approval, exactly. It was close enough to stand in for it. She made 2 more calls that week. The first was to a counseling service in Thunder Bay that did sessions over video, because the nearest one in person had a wait list 18 months long, which was its own kind of Canadian heartbreak and its own kind of grim joke that she and the intake worker shared over the phone. The first session was scheduled for a Tuesday. She told the woman on the line, when asked what she was hoping to get out of it, the truest sentence she could find, I need to learn how to stop surviving my own life and start living in it. For my kid. And I think maybe for me. She had not known she was going to say the last part until it was out, and saying it felt like setting down a pack she had not known the full weight of until her shoulders came up without it. The second call was to the long-term care home on the edge of town, where a hand-lettered sign in the office window had been advertising for a part-time RN since the summer. The coordinator, a brisk, warm woman named Bonnie who had gone to school with Colleen's mother, hired her over the phone in under 10 minutes, and told her to start the following Monday and to wear good shoes because the floors were murder. It was not a trauma bay. It was old people and their slow days and their small needs and their long memories. And Colleen would come to understand, over that first winter, that it was the closest thing to medicine for her own soul that she could have stumbled into, to sit with people at the unhurried end of things and have nothing to do but be present, to learn presence the way you learn a language. Slowly, badly at first, then less badly. The house was not fixed. The roof would not last another year, and she had no idea where the money for it would come from. The sill on the east wall still needed taking right back to the framing. But Roland came over with his tools, and the two of them rebuilt the veranda steps one cold Saturday with Etta handing them screws from a coffee can, and the new steps were solid and true, and did not groan, and that was something you could stand on. The window boxes got cleaned out, and there were curtains in the front room now, blue ones with little white snowflakes on them, that Etta had picked herself from the bin at the church bazaar in the Legion basement, and had insisted on, and had hung crooked, and that Colleen had left exactly as crooked as her daughter hung them, on a Thursday evening in the new year, after her counseling session, which had been harder than any night shift she had ever pulled, and also somehow the first honest hour she had spent inside her own chest in a decade. Colleen sat on the edge of Etta's bed. The room was small. The walls were mostly bare. But there was one drawing taped above the headboard done that week at school, and Colleen looked at it for a long time. It was a house. Two figures stood in front of it, one tall and one small. A few weeks ago, Etta had drawn this same picture, and the house had had no windows in it, just a door, and the two figures had stood apart. In this one, the house had 4 windows, all of them yellow, all of them lit, and the two figures stood with their stick hands joined, and off to the side there was a third figure, broad and stooped, with what was unmistakably a dog, and the whole crooked, careful scene was filled in to the edges with the heavy crayon insistence of a child who has decided the world is safe enough to color in. Etta was lying under the covers with her eyes half closed, her fingers curled at the edge of the blanket. Colleen brushed the hair off her forehead with her thumb, a gesture so soft it surprised even her, as if her hands were remembering a tenderness they had been too busy to use. "Hey," she said. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it." Etta opened her eyes. "You don't have to be brave for me," Colleen said. "You don't have to be quiet, and you don't have to be good all the time, and you don't ever have to hold the scary things in by yourself to keep me from worrying. That's not your job. That was never going to be your job." Her voice held this time. She had been practicing, with the woman in Thunder Bay, at letting it not hold and finding out she survived it, and somehow that practice had given her the strength to keep it steady now when it mattered. "If you're scared, you tell me. If you're sad, you come find me. I'm in here, monkey. I'm all the way in here now, and I'm staying. You're safe." Etta looked at her for a long moment, weighing it the way children weigh the things that matter, and then she smiled. It was not a big smile. It was small and uncertain and entirely real, the kind that costs a person something to give because it means deciding, against the evidence of a hard year, to trust again. And Colleen smiled back, and that cost her something too, and she paid it gladly. Later, when the girl was asleep, Colleen stood at the front window with a cup of tea going cold in her hands and looked out at Caribou Street. The lake was a flat white field under the moon, hard enough now to hold the weight of the ice-fishing huts that had appeared on it that week like a little village out on the water. Next door, Roland's kitchen light was on, warm and steady behind his curtain, the way it was on every winter night, a lighthouse the size of a 60-watt bulb. The house behind her was patched and leaking, and held together with silicone and second chances and the particular stubbornness of a woman who had decided to stay. It would not pass an inspection. It would not impress her brother, but it had a lit window and a child sleeping behind it, and on the wall of the small bare room, the child had drawn a house full of yellow windows and put 3 people in front of it and a dog. And there are kinds of wealth that do not show up on any statement and cannot be bought out by any holding company on the lakefront. She went and checked on Etta one more time before bed, the way she would every night for the rest of their lives. The girl was sleeping on her back with her arms thrown out and her hands open on the blanket, palms up, fingers loose, not gripping the edge of the cover, not clutching a fold of pajama, not holding on to anything at all. She was sleeping the way children sleep when they have decided, all the way down in the place where decisions like that get made, that the world will still be there in the morning, and that the person in charge of the world will too. There are people all around you who have been told, in 100 ways since they were small, that the strong ones don't cry, that the good ones don't complain, that love means carrying it alone so nobody else has to feel the weight. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're reading this with your jawsret and your own door bolted from the inside, certain that the bolting is the same thing as safety. It isn't. Colleen Brisebois thought it was for 44 years, and it nearly cost her the one person she'd locked the door to protect. It took an old man across a fence and a 7-year-old in the doorway to teach her what no plaque ever had, that surviving and living are not the same country, and that you are allowed, finally, to put it down. So I'll leave you with the question. Roland might have asked you if you'd been the one sitting at his kitchen table that gray morning with the snow coming down, who's been waving everybody off, telling them they're fine, while they go under so quietly that even they can't hear it. And what would it take tonight to throw them a rope, or to reach out just once and take hold of the one already being held out to you?